Hey, it's nice to meet you, David. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
It's a pleasure. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so where are you located?
I'm in Southern California, in Corona, which is
Okay,
close to LA. Yeah.
okay. How are you doing? How did everything transpire with the fires for you?
Fires, well, we've had that experience before, 5 years ago or so, but we had no problems this time because we live on the eastern side of
Okay,
LA, southeastern really. So Altadena and the Palisades are pretty far from us. So we were
okay.
very lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great to catch up with you. I really have enjoyed at the edge of spring and being in Kansas City in the middle of winter. The thought of that album title is very tasty.
Yeah, I hear you. I did
But I
live in
will
Colorado.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, but I will tell you the one thing that's warmed all of us all of these past 5 or 6 years is when the Chiefs go into the Super Bowl. It just makes everything a little easier.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm actually kind of a Chiefs fan too. I have to admit
Okay,
it.
cool. Well, it's weird because there's been kind of this vitriol and this kind of
Yeah,
like the New England Patriots thing has been kind of a flex to us. So it's fine. It
yeah,
happens. Anytime someone wins a lot, it's going to turn into something.
yeah, of course. But
Yeah.
they're good.
Yeah, they are. And every
Yeah.
year, the architecture of why they're good's different. But I will tell you this year, and maybe it's just because it's in New Orleans, there is a weird magic, there's a voodoo that goes into this team.
I hear you. Yeah.
It's very strange, very, very
It is.
strange.
Yeah.
But at any rate, let's get into the at the edge of spring. I'm curious, how did this album come about? Give me kind of the beginnings and how it gained steam and became what it is today.
Okay, well, it's a third album that I've done with this group of players and over the last 10 years. And so it's just kind of a continuation. It came out of the pandemic. Um, things were rolling very well like they were for everybody, right? And suddenly everything just shut down. So I started, and I had retired from teaching right before that, and from higher ed, and we had moved to California from Colorado. So I just started writing tunes, and I would take them around. I'd write a chart. I'd take it to one of my college teacher friends who has a good band. There are two or three that will play my charts and listen to it and work on it a little bit more. And then at some point, I knew I had enough things to do another CD. And so then I sort of became focused on putting a set of pieces together and improving them. So I worked on it. And it was just and I also saved my money. So, that was, that's the only thing that held me back. I had to get to a certain point where I knew I had enough funds to go forward and get this done because it's not like the old days where somebody gives you money to do it. So, and I didn't have any grants. And so the first two, I had university grants, which really helps. That's about half the price. So, anyway, so I was motivated just because uh, I enjoyed the experience of the first two. I wanted to do another one and I wanted to do it even better. And this one is better, I think, than the other ones, although the first two were good. But it was really about just wanting to put my music out there to be heard, and about the only way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. So, talk to me a little bit about the tracks you picked. You had sent me over some liners and some
Yeah,
notes, and I'm curious, how did you assemble all of these? What was the final cut process?
yeah, that's interesting because I struggled with that. I had these two charts of Wayne Shorter tunes, and and I'm going, how does that fit in here? It doesn't fit in well at all. And because what I do when it's just like when I put a concert together, I think in terms of feels or styles of pieces. I don't want all the swing tunes here and all the straight eighth notes here, that kind of thing, and tempos. And I actually think about keys. So I can lay these pieces down, and it's almost like the main key. There's a lot of keys within a chart, but the main key, uh, it's like a chord progression. It's kind of weird, but it kind of works. And so it just, uh, and then the other question is, I came up with the title and that piece. Where does that fit in? Because so often you start off a CD with the title piece, and that didn't really work because it's kind of a mellow. swing thing, whereas the one called Starlight was more like an opener.
Yeah.
So that's just like putting a concert together, in my point of view. And all of those things came into it. And at some point, I had this order, and I went, there it is. Okay, so and moved forward. And it seemed appropriate to put the Wayne Shorter tunes together at the end because they're quite different. They're not really my tunes, and they work together pretty well.
Yeah.
So,
So what about the album title? How did that come about?
I was commissioned to do a piece at Cal Poly Pomona around 2019, and I'd done a piece in an album called Enter Autumn, and this commission happened in the spring. So I said, well, I think it's time for Enter Spring,
Yeah.
but that didn't really work, for another album. I'm not going to do an Enter series.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about it and what that really meant to me. And having lived in Colorado, gone through all those winters, and moving into spring is such a glorious thing. And I'm sure it's that way in Kansas City too.
Yeah.
Uh, and I didn't dislike winter in Colorado. I can't imagine it in Cleveland, but
Yeah.
in Colorado, it's pretty nice. It's really bad and really nice for a while.
Yeah.
So it just came to me. Well, yeah, it's like what I like is at the edge of spring, where it's just about there, and it's
Yeah.
so great and it feels so good, and there's a certain feeling about it. And so I changed the title to that, and I worked on the piece. The piece originally was quite limited because of it was young players. There's only so much they can do, and a lot of things were scaled down. And so now when I started writing it for the players that I want to write for, it becomes a different piece, and different soloists, obviously different instruments playing solos. I had a guitar player, Steve Kowalczyk, who's a fabulous guitarist, and in fact he's on the jazz cruise right now with Jeff Clayton and I mean Jeff Hamilton and John Clayton. But
Yeah.
anyway, that had to be a solo for him and those two other guys, and so the piece changed dramatically. Actually, the basic tune was the same, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So all of these things evolve. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting how you explain being at the edge of spring. It reminds me of when you initially get into jazz. I know for me, you're getting on the edge of something brand new. It
right.
feels good. You're not quite sure what you're getting into, but you know
Yeah,
it's going to be warm and good, right? Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
so let me ask you this. What is your ultimate hope for the listener? What do you hope they get from this album?
Well, I just hope that it feels good. I'm all about feel, and I want it, I want someone to listen to it and say, "This sounds beautiful." Okay, this is a beautiful sound, and I love the melodies, and it swings. When it swings, it swings, and it really does. These guys can swing, uh, and ultimately, that's it. I just want them to enjoy it. No question. I want them to like it from the first note. That's what I'm trying to create, really.
Yeah. So, David, take me back to your childhood. Where were you born and raised, and what were these seeds of jazz? How did this journey into the music begin for you?
Well, I grew up in Austin, Texas, and and I was oddly enough, I didn't play a music. I played musical instruments. I didn't play a jazz instrument.
Yeah.
As a little kid, I played cello. They have a string project program there at the University of Texas, and I did that. And then when it was time to start in band, I had quit the cello, played baseball, and so my parents wouldn't buy me an instrument, so I was given an instrument by the band director, and it was a baritone horn. So that was my instrument, through the grades. Became an all-state euphonium player twice in Texas, and pretty much a virtuosic player. So I graduated from high school in 1968. My teacher at the University of Texas said, "All right, what are you going to do with this instrument?" He was a trombone player, of course, and I said, "Well, I don't know. Yeah, not much, right? So you should be playing trombone." So as a freshman in college, I went from going to and pretty frustrating, but it was an amazing learning experience. And so man, do I know how to teach the trombone because I remember. But at the same time, I was introduced to jazz as a freshman, and I had this fabulous teacher, Dick Goodwin, who left about the time that I finished at Texas and went to South Carolina. He was at the University of South Carolina for his whole career. And he became my composition teacher. And he was a guy who was a classical composer, but also a jazz player and a jazz composer, arranger. So pretty quickly, we came to an arrangement that when we did my private lessons, composition lessons, one week would be jazz oriented, the next week would be classical oriented. I did that for years. And so I started writing charts for the band. He was very encouraging like that. He played the charts I wrote, even the bad ones. He'd at least play them once. And some of them, the very first one I wrote, my God, it must have been on 5 concerts. And I mean, I was beginning to think I was a composer or something.
Yeah.
And and he encouraged me to become a composition major. So that was a change in my whole direction. Those two things. Uh, and I went into college thinking I was going to be a high school band director. And before long, I was looking at being a composer, a trombonist, and then I came up with the idea of becoming a university composer, a university professor rather.
Yeah.
And I had some teachers say, "Well, you're going to have a doctorate," which I'll tell you, I never got. And I just said, "Well, okay, I'm going to apply anyway." And I managed to get a university teaching job when I was 24. I was a professor already. It was ridiculous, but really lucky.
Yeah.
And I did it 44 years. And yeah, and so part of my first job, well, I was a low brass teacher, and I was a jazz band director, and I taught freshman music theory. My degrees ended up being in music theory composition, and so I found that man, I could really put a band together. I'm not sure what it's about, but I had kind of mediocre players, and they played great, and that just led me to moving through to other positions. Eventually, I was at Cal State Los Angeles for a number of years. I had a great band there, but I became the chair of the music department, over time, and so I kind of moved into a different thing that I never imagined I would do. I was a university administrator, ending up as director of the School of Music at the University of Northern Colorado, and that was my last stop, and that's the best job I ever had.
Yeah.
It was great, and I knew about a lot of stuff. I had taught a lot of things. I had introduced electronic tech, computer music to Cal State LA. I had the first Yamaha DX7 and drum machine in my office, and with a Macintosh, which you had to put in a disc to start it up.
Yeah.
People would come in going, "Wow, that's really interesting."
Yeah.
So, and now here we are. It's this incredible setup.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I evolved, my career, and it was always interesting. And I've been married for 54 years, and we've moved a lot,
Yeah.
to say the least. And our kids got used to it, although they stayed in California when we moved to Colorado. So that, and then we came back to California because of grandkids. But that's all of it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But so I always had really good bands available at the university,
Yeah.
particularly starting at the second place I worked.
Yeah.
And that was a very good established band when I arrived, and so I wrote charts for them, and they were hard, but these were really great players, and so I never really became established much as one of those university composers who writes charts for young bands and gets published and all that. I didn't really do that. So started a pro band while I was in LA. Actually, I did it in Denver too earlier, but the one in LA had name players, like Gary Foster playing lead alto, and Charlie Loper was the lead trombone, and so forth. Steve Howden played drums, and it was a great band, and it was going pretty well. But so after a couple of years of that, I ended up becoming chair of the music department. I was active in IAJE, which I became president of eventually, and I was just too busy to do it all. I had to figure out what was going to go by this, off to the side, and that band was one of them. So I always thought that I'd get back to that, and that's what I did in Colorado. Uh,
Yeah. So what was the first live jazz show that you saw that blew you away?
the first one, that's a great question because there were a bunch of them right at the beginning of when I became aware of it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I think I was a freshman in college, and it was a summer jazz festival that the University of Texas Summer Jazz Band did the opening for it. And I think it was I want to say it was summer of '69. You can imagine, okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, so Miles Davis quartet
Wow.
with Chick Corea
Wow.
and Jack DeJohnette, and and I'm assuming it was Ron Carter. I'm not sure about the bass player.
Yeah.
And they were doing a tour, but so they were onto this 3 day festival, Austin, Dallas, and Houston. And Cannonball and his group was there. Uh, and oh God, it was, and the concert, I mean, the night thing ended with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and so there were about 5 or 6 acts, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And that blew me away. That was fun. And just to actually meet, I didn't meet Miles Davis, but, you know, I did meet Cannonball and
Yeah.
a couple of others. Nina Simone, I think, was on that show.
Wow.
It's
That's
crazy.
wild. That's
Yeah. So,
crazy.
yeah, it's like talk about eating too much. I mean,
That's a buffet times 10.
oh, it was a great buffet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very exciting. It was exciting to play with. I was really young, you know, I was about 19, and to play with the band on those stages, and then just get to, we were first, no one was really even there really. And, you know, to go into the audience and just get to be right there, but also have access to the backstage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was very cool.
That's
And
cool.
I've had a lot of experiences like that over the years that were just fabulous. I remember as president of IEJ, the sort of the honor in a way of introducing the Chick Corea trio for the night concert after he'd been awarded the NEA Jazz Master Award at lunchtime. You
Wow.
know, and I sat next to him. I sat between him and Freddie Hubbard. I mean, those are the kind of things you never dreamed that you would
Yeah.
do. Yeah,
Yeah. That's crazy.
yeah, wonderful.
So let me ask you this. What has consistently been the part of you that's loved this music and loved teaching the students and being a part of it and making albums? What has been the consistent love that you've had every day for this music?
Well, it's hard to put that into words. I mean, for the music, uh, it's finding those great tunes. You know, like I discovered Art Blakey, you know, and the Jazz Messengers kind of late, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And it had to have been around. I mean, I knew about them, of course,
Yeah.
but never really spent much time listening to it until uh, three of my colleagues who are on this record that we're talking about here. They had this regular job in Greeley, Colorado, for a number of years at a country club restaurant, a really very hip situation. And they kept playing every night, one by one. I'm going, I love that tune. What is that? You know,
Yeah.
oh, you know, yeah, well, it's a Wayne Shorter tune. You know, that's the first time I ever really noticed the tune. So I
Yeah.
started exploring it, and I realized how great these players were on that band consistently
Yeah.
through the bands, but especially when Freddie and Wayne and you know those guys were together.
Yeah.
So it's finding those things. It's like finding Vince Mendoza's music with WDR
Yeah.
on online. It's like, holy mackerel, man, these guys are incredible.
Yeah.
And you know, it's that daily kind of exploration, which we can do so easily now.
Yeah.
And it amazes me the kids don't do it more
Yeah.
in this music. Um, and as far as the teaching thing, um, I just love you know having a student that gets it. You know, seeing that moment when they get it. Um, and I always tell people that about the one of the very best trombone students I ever had. I was in college and I was teaching at a music store, and this little kid came in with his trombone that he'd never opened up, the case, and we put it together, and I got him started. And the very first sound he made was like T. It was just a beautiful sound. I went, "Oh, that's it!
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
change anything." And then he was with me for 2 or 3 years before I moved on, and he played great and he loved it. And it was such a joy to see him discover it from that first note.
Yeah.
And so as later, of course, became mainly a teacher of composers and arrangers, and that's exciting to see them develop a piece over, say, a semester,
Yeah.
and see how they come. And I don't I at the end, my last 5 years of teaching, I moved away from being an administrator, and I taught only graduate students. I had master's and doctoral students in composition, and these guys were good. I mean, they were really good, and I didn't have to tell them much, but it was really, I learned as much as them, probably maybe more. Just watching them, it was really great to see them figure it out, and the sort of wonder about it.
Yeah.
The way you feel like you've discovered something about yourself you had no idea, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is cool. So, David, I got to know, everyone out there has a perception of you. Family, friends, students, everyone that gets your music, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I'm an old guy who loves his grandkids. What can I say?
Yeah, that's right.
And my perception is that I don't have all the answers, man. It's like I'm a person who's trying to still figure it out. And every time I start a chart, like I'm doing a chart right now for Michael Deese, and the trombonist,
Oh, yeah.
and it's his tune, and I'm going, and I'm about halfway through it. I'm going, I have no idea if this is good. I mean, is this right? I don't know, man. It's like, and
Yeah.
that still happens.
Yeah.
That happened when I was a freshman in college, and I still have that. And so I think I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm just like probably most composers and arrangers. We're just trying to figure it out. Some act like they really know it, and I hope that I don't. I think that I'm someone who's interested in still growing and
Yeah,
figuring out things, and coming up with stuff that works.
for sure. So, if anyone wants to pick up a copy at the Edge of Spring, the best way to benefit you is at Bandcamp, or how should they do that?
No, I don't have it on Bandcamp, but you go directly to my website,
Okay.
which is pretty easy to remember, David Caffey Music. And
Okay.
the CD can be bought there. And of course, band records can buy the charts. All the charts are available either there or through ijazzmusic.com. Uh, and uh, yeah, it used to be not so long ago, you could sell them through CD Baby.
Yeah.
That's what I did in the previous things, but they quit doing that.
Yeah.
And so getting a hold of a real CD is challenging.
Yeah.
And I just didn't sign up for Bandcamp is all. But I know that some people are doing it that way.
Sure.
In a way, it's the same difference. It's just that that one is better known as an entity for everybody, and mine's a little more direct.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, davidcaffeymusic.com. It's really easy. Go to recordings and there they are. And it's done through the website. It's so easy, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, what about live shows? Anything on your itinerary now as we get to the edge of spring and start getting into the warm months?
Uh, I'm not sure because the players mostly live in Colorado. I'm in California, and uh, I'm hoping to do one up there, which we did before as well. Uh, and in fact, we did several shows on the last album in Denver and Greeley, and which it's a great way to sell CDs for sure. But mainly, it's just fun to get everybody back together, and then, these guys recorded it, and then they didn't really hear it until we went through the process, and so it's kind of fun for them to go back to it and play it. But I don't have anything settled yet because that's a financial undertaking as part of it. So I have to figure that one out. It's always about money,
It is. It is. Well, David, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. I've loved the album. I appreciate you taking some time out to talk about that, your life and music. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you, and
Yeah.
thanks for listening to the music.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
sir. Great to meet you. Hey.